Good evening, everybody. It's Ellen Lewis from Crazy for You. And tonight I want to talk about blocking. So, if you are a knitter or a crocheter and you have never blocked your work, you're in for a treat because blocking is almost magical. I'm going to show you, we're going to talk about what blocking is, the different methods of doing it, and how it can really change your fabric and the fibers in your fabric. So if this is new to you, that's wonderful. I'm excited to share it with you. And I would be interested in hearing what experience you've had with blocking things. Do you block your things? Tell me in the comments if you block your work and when and what your experience has been with that. So if you're new, I would encourage you to like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you can get notified when I go live every week on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. So, hey, Sandy. Hi, Evelyn. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you. Okay, so what is blocking, right? Simply put, blocking is applying water to your fabric to get it to take on a slightly different shape. I think of blocking a lot of times kind of like curling your hair. You know, you wet it, you put it in, nobody does this anymore, but once upon a time, we wet it, we put it in rollers, we let it dry that way, we blocked our hair, we curled our hair. Blocking is a lot like that. It's just a matter of getting your fabric, knitted or crocheted fabric, wet and putting it in the position you want it to be in and letting it dry that way. But it actually does so much more than just changing the shape. But let's start there. Hey, Kathy, how are you? Hey, Kelly, Gwen, nice to see you guys. Okay, so first of all, when you finish a garment, whether it's in pieces or whether it's all in one piece, sometimes it's kind of a mess, right? We've all seen that. Our fabric is all, it's all curled up. If we've knitted in pieces, the sleeves and the fronts are, they're in these little tubes and they want to curl up. And it's sort of discouraging. You think, oh my gosh, look at all of this. How am I ever going to make this into a sweater? And that's kind of where the magic of blocking comes in. So let me show you. I just was blocking the parts of a sweater that I'm working on today, and I took some pictures. So let me share my screen with you. All right, let's see. Yeah, Sandy, you are a good girl. She's always blocked her garments. So real quick, let me just go up here. All right, where am I? Okay. All right. What blocking does to our fabric. First of all, blocking corrects shape, right? This is what I was talking about. And this is the garment that I have been working on. This is my Agnes sweater and fresh off my needles. This is the back and these are the two sleeves. And you can see that they don't really look that great. And it's challenging to start to seam something like this when you're not sure, do you have the right size? Do you have the right shape? Did you even do it correctly? So it's really important to block your fabric. And by that, I mean pinning it out to its correct size and shape. And that's what I do for my fabrics. I pin them out and then I provide steam to them. So let me back up and let's talk about the 3 different methods of blocking our fabric. I got a little bit ahead of myself there. So how do you guys do it? So tell me in the comments how you do it. There is wet blocking, there is steam blocking, and there is spray blocking. So I would be interested to know if you already know all of those methods and which one you use. Let me go over what they are. So the 3 methods. Wet blocking means that you take your garment pieces or your shawl or your hat or whatever, and you put it in a tub of lukewarm water with or without soak or eucalyptus or some kind of a cleanser in there. and you just let it soak until it's completely saturated. Okay. And when I say completely saturated, I mean, if you look at it, there's no little air bubbles coming out. And you know that it's completely saturated because it's sunk to the bottom of your tub. And then you squeeze it out, and then you lay it out and you pin it to shape. That's wet blocking. Okay. Steam blocking is when you take your piece or your pieces and you pin them out first. You pin them to shape, and then you apply steam, either with a steamer or by laying a wet tea towel over it and a hot iron over the tea towel to make the steam go into the fabric. That's steam blocking. And the third method is spritz blocking or mist blocking. And what that involves is just like steam blocking, except instead of applying steam, you just spritz the garment or the pieces with water and let them get completely saturated and then dry in that shape. So wet blocking, steam blocking, and spritz blocking. All right, let's see what everybody has to say. All right, so Norma definitely blocks her stuff. Judy, always block. Yes, Judy, you could be given this, right? Okay, Kathy, wet blocking. Carolyn, wet blocking. All right, Judy, wet, cool water, wool wash. Okay. All right, wet blocking and experimenting with steam blocking. Wet or steam block. Never heard of spray blocking. Mostly wet. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of you do wet blocking, and I get that. I have done my share of wet blocking. The spray blocking, I had a question about the spray blocking. That's also, you can do that just by laying wet towels on top of your fabric once it's pinned out. It's the same idea. You know, you're just using cool water and getting the thing wet. So the big difference between wet blocking and steam blocking, obviously they're different methods, but when you are wet blocking, you're getting your garment wet and then shaping it. With steam blocking and spritz blocking or mist blocking, you are putting your fabric into the size and shape you want it and then applying the water. And this is a really important difference because depending on what you're blocking, the different methods are better for different kinds of projects. All right. So if you are making mostly shawls or, scarves and things, you probably are most familiar with wet blocking, because when you wet block, like I said, your fabric is completely saturated with the water. And when the wool is wet like that, it's very relaxed. It's going to do whatever you tell it to do. And you can stretch it to any size and shape you want, which is exactly what you want when you are doing a shawl. You know, you want to be able to pull those points down. You want to be able to open it up the lace and really stretch it out and make that fabric nice and drapey. So that's a great use of wet blocking. I almost never wet block a sweater that I'm going to seam. So I never wet block my sweater pieces. And here's why. I have found that a lot of times people have a tendency to overblock because the fabric is so relaxed. It's very easy for it to grow to be larger than you want it to be. So if your sweater pieces, they're saturated and you're starting to lay them out, they can end up being bigger than you expected. And you find that you're having to push them into shape. That never happens with steam blocking. I'm a huge fan of steam blocking for seamed sweaters because you're never going to overstretch the garment. And people always ask, well, what about when you wash it? Well, the difference is when you've already seamed your sweater, you have those seams in place to prevent the sweater from growing past its seams. Those seams provide structure, and you can't really stretch it beyond that. So when you've got a seam sweater or a sweater knit all in one piece, it's okay because, or not all in one piece, but it's all together. And I'll show you that later on. You're not ever going to overstretch it, but it is very easy to overstretch things if you wet block your pieces. Okay, let's see. Hey, Betty from Mississippi. Nice to see you. Does that make sense? Tell me in the chat if that makes sense about wet blocking, and have you ever had that happen to you, or have you never made a sweater that from pieces? The only time I might wet block a sweater that I'm going to seam is if the gauge is too tight, if it accidentally got too tight, or I really needed to make that sweater larger than it was knit. And then I might wet block it so that I had the capacity to really stretch it out. But it's so easy to, like I said, to overstretch fabric when it's wet. All right, let's see what Kathy has to say. I hung a shawl on a clothesline. Good, good, good. Yeah, so I think, oh, that's such a clever idea to put it on a clothesline. Yeah, with the blocking wires. Good job. Okay, so now you know my preference is for steam blocking, and I believe that it works just as well. You know, you have more capacity to stretch the thing out. If you're steam blocking and you feel like you really need to have more stretch, you can do that. Once the thing is steamed and wet and hot, you can open it up more, but it's just easier to not overstretch your fabric when you are steam blocking. So the only time I wouldn't steam block is when you have a fiber that is really delicate, or something that has, like, we have a yarn in the shop that has a little tiny sequins in it, and we have another one that has a little metallic thread running through that. I would never, ever, ever steam block that, because you just don't know how that metallic thread is going to respond to the heat. It could melt, or, you know, otherwise damage it. But I do steam block fabrics like Kid Silk's, silk. Yeah, that's how I do it. So anyway, that's just me. But let me just show you again. Let's go back to this. And this is the before, like I said, and this is the after. So when you have put your fabric out, when you have blocked it, those edges are nice and flat, right? Those are where your seams are going to go, and you know that your sleeve cap is going to fit right in there. And when I'm doing this with a sweater, it also gives me a chance to make sure that I haven't made any mistakes. I've helped knitters put things together, and I've seen in some instances where the shoulder bind off was off. And you notice right here, whoops, go back. This is not in line. I'm going to have to actually go back and fix that shoulder, because this is a little bit low. Yep, that just needs to be pulled up a little bit, and this armhole needs to be a little bit higher. So when you're blocking, you get a chance to look at your fabric pieces again and make sure that everything is correct. I also, now that I look at this, I want to move this over a little bit, because it doesn't look like the sleeve cap is completely symmetrical. And I'm glad I didn't already block it to this shape. I just pinned it in a hurry so that I could take the pictures. Anyway, so that's really, I think, kind of an important thing. And I want to show you here real quick. Even if you're just doing a scarf, this is a piece of knitting that Ginny Stein did, and I only blocked half of it. I wanted to show you. So you get that curling when you have when you have stockinette, and blocking. I blocked this half, but not this half. So you see that you can, this side, the fabric is all lying flat, and here it still wants to curl under. So that the blocking will temporarily, for a fairly long time, will help your fabric to lie flat. I'm not telling you that it's not going to ever curl up, because it does tend to after a while, but for the most part, you can get a nice smooth bit on it. Okay, so I want to share with you my next thing. Okay, so as I was talking about, if you've done a sweater in the round or all in one piece, this is actually a cardigan again I'm going to show you, and you haven't blocked it, it can look really wonky. And if you do manage to put a sweater together in pieces and you haven't blocked it, it can look kind of like this, which I don't think is all that great. So this is a sweater that came to me. It was a sample that came from the manufacturer. And you see it hadn't ever been blocked, and it was pretty much unwearable. Everything just looked really wonky, right? So and this was knit all in one piece. I ended up taking this and pinning it, and I opened up this ribbing down here. So I stretched the ribbing open so that it didn't cause the sides of the garment to gather up. And look what a difference. This is a before and after. I think that's pretty shocking. Really looks nice. And do you see how it actually looks like a garment you could wear, right? So even after something's been put together, or if you've knitted in the round, you can still block it, and it can still make a really huge difference in the way the thing looks, right? Yes. Wow. So I want to show you another thing here. And this is also about changing the shape. Okay, so this is a garment, a shawl that came, and it came like this. All right, so they knit it, and they didn't do anything to it. Okay, they just sent it. It was a sample that came again from the manufacturer. And I'm not dissing the manufacturer. I appreciate that they send this, but it needs some work. So I only did a portion of it, but I want to show you the difference that the blocking makes. Do you see that? So when you are blocking a shawl, you can pull those points down. See, those points don't really exist. They're just sort of suggestions of points. They're little scallops, and you can't see the beautiful stitch work in it. Let me show this here. So you really can't see the stitch work in this garment, this shawl, because it's all bunched up. But over here, oh my goodness, all those pins. Over here where I actually blocked it, you can begin to see, and this is the right side. You can begin to see the yarn overs, and you can pull these points down and make a really kind of a dramatic edge if you want. So see how much prettier that looks? I have a picture of this that I will share with you in the in process. So here is the in process where I had it on the blocking board, and I had pinned along this line and then pulled these points down to show you how to create those. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Okay, so I have a couple questions. What did I do with the ribbing? Okay, so I'm sure you're talking about this one, right? Okay, so this one, what I did is I stretched that ribbing, I stretched that ribbing out so that it would be as long as the fabric, right? So that, ribbing pulls in, right? So because the ribbing hadn't been blocked out, it was pulling the sides of the fabric up. So I just stretched it so that it was long enough to accommodate all of the length in this garment. Does that make sense, Carolyn? Yeah. Yeah, it's quite spectacular, the difference. I mean, this one on the left was completely unwearable, and the one on the right I think is really, really cute. Yeah, I wear that sometimes. So that's kind of fun. All right. Let's see, where was I? Okay. So as I guess it was Judy mentioned, blocking is a great way to get your fabric to lie flat, to change the shape of your shawl, to even out your edges so that you can seam more easily. But actually blocking, as like I said, Judy pointed out, it really changes the nature of your fabric, right? The texture of your fabric. And I have several samples here to show you. Um, let's see. There's so many samples. Okay. So a lot of people, especially something like Noro. So this is a Noro swatch that I did. And can you see the texture of it? The stitches are kind of uneven. And I know that this is an uneven yarn, but look at the difference after it's been blocked. Do you see how the stitches are so much more even? Just the knitting of it, the stitches look tidier and more even. Here's another example. This is felted tweed. So do you see? There's my dog. See how the stitches look kind of uneven there? Now here's the exact same yarn on the exact same needle after it's been blocked. Can you see that the stitches are just so much more even? And it's not anything that I did, it's just in the blocking. And while this is true for most fabrics and most fibers, it's especially dramatic with a woolen spun yarn, because with a woolen spun, all of the fibers are going in kinds of all different directions, and the heat or the water, it's actually just the moisture. It's not so much the heat as the moisture really gets in there, and they absorb that moisture, and then they relax and redistribute themselves. So during the spinning process, and even to some extent during the knitting process, there's twist introduced into those fibers, into the yarn. That's how you make yarn. You twist fiber, okay? And so all of that energy is in there. And when you put it in the water, when you give it a little bath or give it a little steam, it absorbs the water and it has a chance to redistribute all of that energy, and all of the fibers kind of open up in a really, really nice way. I did an article on this in the current issue, I guess issue 20 of Noro magazine, talking about how blocking in a little bath really changes these fibers. So that's an example. Here is another example I want to share with you. So this is another Noro fabric. This is Okunishima, which has quite a lot of Angora in it. So I'm going to show this kind of at a distance. Can you see that down here, this has been blocked and the fabric is very smooth and even. And this section up here has not been blocked. And you can really see the difference, like in an A-B comparison. Here is the blocked and here is the unblocked. So do you see how it evens the stitches out? It makes you look like such a pro. Right? So that's an example of that. And another example another aspect of blocking that I would like to talk about real quick is the aspect of how blocking really enhances any kind of a fuzzy texture. So if you have, this has the Angora in it, if you feel this, it's so much softer and more loose after it's been blocked, because any spinning oil that was placed into the fabric, into the yarn when they were making it, washes out, and it allows the fabric to bloom. So when I say bloom, this is probably a better example. So do you see how the stitches sort of seem to be a little far apart and a little loose in this piece of knitting that hasn't been blocked? Exact same yarn, exact same needle. The stitches have bloomed and they look closer together and just more cohesive. So blocking enhances texture as well. Okay. Okay, and we're almost out of time. So the last thing that I wanted to share with you, which is kind of a cool trick. How many of you have unknit a garment or, a big section of your garment? And then when you try to re-knit it, the fabric looks really different because the kinked yarn that you knit the first time knits up differently than the yarn that wasn't kinked. So this is a magic trick that I want to show you, and it is that blocking restores knitted yarn. So here's an example of yarn. Lovely Whitney asked me to take her magnolia sweater out. We had to go back quite a bit, and she had many inches of yarn of fabric that she had to take out. So I pulled that out and I put it on the Swift and I put it into a hank. And here it is lying there on the table, and we can't really knit with it because it's all kinked up. But after steaming, look at it. So it absolutely changes itself. I have a little video I can share with you too. Here, let me get this on. Let me share screen over here. This. I'm going to share this with you. Okay, this is not the greatest video in the whole wide world, but I think it will give you an idea of how this works. So just running along that kinked up yarn will absolutely smooth it out. So you just put the steam on it and you can almost see it relax. Do you know what I mean? You can see that the kinks just sort of relax out. I think Terry was there that day when we were doing this. It's quite shocking. So when you have that yarn that you've already knit and it's kinked up and you can't knit it again, put it on your Swift and wind it into a hank and then take it off and then use a little steam to smooth and relax those kinks. You can also absolutely wet block the yarn. You can get that soaking wet and you can lay it on the table and you can let it dry. But if you're going to do a wet block with that pre-knit yarn, you're going to have to weight it. So you'll have to hang it a little bit and put a little weight on there so that it is stretched out, which I don't love because then you're starting to take some of the elasticity out of it. But you can totally use blocking to rehabilitate yarn that you already knit. So I hope this has been helpful. Tell me if you learned anything about blocking tonight or if you have any remaining questions about it, and if you are thinking that you might like to try steam blocking, because I'm all about it. All right. Yes, good. I'm glad it was helpful. I'm glad. Good, good, good. Okay. So as long as you learned something, or you maybe think about things a little differently. So if you have something that you've knit or a yarn that you're trying and you're not sure that you love it, give it a little bath or steam it a little bit and see if it doesn't relax and soften up into a fabric that you're absolutely crazy about. So don't write it off before you've blocked it. So, okay, well, that's what I have for you tonight, and I appreciate you joining me, and I will see you next time. Have a great evening.